Welcome to Gone to Texas, a podcast about AMC's Preacher. My name is Alex, and I have not read any of Ennis and Dylan's Preacher.
And my name is Nick, and I have read all of Ennis and Dylan's Preacher.
Today we will be discussing Season 4, Episode 8 of the AMC series, titled Fear of the Lord. While we will not be spoiling any of the comic and by extension any future plotlines of the show, we will be discussing the details of the series through Season 4, Episode 8. So pause this and go catch up before you listen to the rest of the episode. If you enjoy this show or any other show on the Midwest Podcast Network, please consider heading over to mpn.bz/Patreon and pledge as little as $1 a month to make our network even better. Special thanks to Jason K. and Gojo, who have pledged at the level of $10+ per month. You can find more episodes of our podcast at g2tpodcast.com. That's the letter G, number 2, letter T, podcast.com. We're also at G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can send feedback to g2tpodcast@gmail.com. to tell us what you think of our podcast and share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on our show. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Preacher or our podcast, much like our buddy Mark did. Mark tweeted at us, and after last week he said, just finished the episode as usual, very good. In the scene where Cassidy is giving a monologue to the men in the synagogue, my wife caught sight of, we think, a Seth Rogen cameo. You might want to give that scene another look. I did give it another look, and while there is a man who looks very much like Seth Rogen,
oh wow,
as I have and am showing to Nick right now, in an earlier part of the scene, you can kind of see that it is not Seth Rogen.
It does look a lot like him,
but it does look a lot like him. So I tweeted back at you, Mark, if you want to take a look at the pictures and let me know
if that's the guy,
if that's the right guy that I picked out, or maybe I just missed him overall.
He's just really obviously in the foreground, and you just breeze past it.
I was like, I swear to God, he's not the rabbi.
That would have been the role, though.
Yeah, you would think so, but yeah, Mark, let us know. Maybe he's there somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, we've had some thoughts from Bruce come in on this week's episode, which I think I'll probably try to remember to bring up a little bit throughout the episode as we talk about it. But yeah, the Discord is thriving as usual. People talking about some Preacher. David Steele volunteered to take part in the Preacher Summit.
There we go.
If and when that does happen in the future.
I spoke to Lance today, actually, and I said, hey, do you want to join us for the big grand finale wrap-up summit, whatever? And he said he has not watched any of this season yet. He said, you guys are the only reason, or he phrased it not like that, but he just like, you guys are my reason for watching Preacher, basically, even though he loves the book.
Yeah.
And I think he's liked the show, but he's also very busy right now.
That's true.
As we all are. Funny how that happens. Mm-hmm. Time goes on and you get busier. But I am sure he would blast through it in a weekend or something to partake in the overall discussion, because I think as a book reader, this season will be like the most divisive for people. People are either going to embrace it or just denounce it altogether.
Well, and then, like, it's basically like the shit or get off the pot of like so much of what you would want to have out of the adaptation.
Yes,
right? And
as this episode really demonstrates. Sometimes it's shit and get off the pot.
Yeah. So, I don't really know exactly what we're gonna do. I know we kind of talked about, like, should we do a season wrap up and a series wrap up? Should we combine them? Should we come back later after maybe reading some of the books and talk about everything? So.
Yeah, that would be incredible, actually, to have you read it all. And then the thing. It is long. I mean, it's 60 issues, but it's a page turner. Like, yeah, it really. I could read the whole thing in 2 days.
Here's the thing. I think if I literally had the purpose of a podcast was to read a thing, and I could be like, all right, I'm reading 9 issues of this week, that would probably make me do it. I don't know. If it was like, we're going to read a chapter of The Dark Tower this week and talk about it, I could probably get it done.
Dude, if it was a chapter a week, that podcast would take 3 years.
Maybe forget what the beginning of the book is by the time we get to the end of it.
I mean, that's 7 novels, 8 if you count the one he released after. I forget what it's called. I have it. I still haven't read it.
The thing is, I didn't when I was in school and we had to read books, I didn't do well with the, hey, read this amount of the book by this next time, and we're going to discuss it.
Really? Okay.
I just never... I didn't... and that's the thing. Most of it was like, none of these books are about things that I really, really care about.
Sure.
You know? Or it was like the same stuff over and over again. Like, the curriculum of my school, for some reason, is very... I mean... Not that these topics aren't worthwhile, but it was very much focused on like the Holocaust and slavery, and those were kind of like the two things that most of the curriculum hit upon for probably a good 6 years of your education in the English department. And so it was just one of those things where I didn't feel like they were doing a good job of rounding out everybody's like experience with reading and novels and things like that, and I think I maybe would have done better had we spread it around a little bit more to different genres and stuff like that. I also have very much come around to the fact that I always used to think in school that I liked science and math more because I liked that there was a right answer. And I hated the English teacher bullshit.
Interesting.
But yet then I got out of school and started watching more movies and talking about like themes and interpretations and what different things mean to different people and stuff like that. So I think I've very much come to that later in life than if I would have in school. Maybe I would have cared about English a little bit more. But
that's
anyway.
really interesting. I mean, that's a whole... We could talk about that for quite a while.
Yeah.
I really like that idea, though, the right answer. That's interesting. There is something, I think, for at least for certain people, there's something very appealing about a finite answer and a finite solution, and just being able to say, like, this is the thing. This is the way you do it.
Yeah.
Here, solve,
I was more
solve for X.
comfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, and that's nice because it's something that you can wrap your head around, and you can like...
You and I should end up at the right answer in the end.
Yes.
But when you look, when you hold up a symbol that's in a book, it might mean something different to you than it does to me, right?
Sure. And which is funny because even in English, though, there can be a right answer in terms of...
Yeah, that's true.
In terms of like grammar and spelling, but you can make the argument that there is no real right answer.
Yeah.
It's like the... which Marvel movie? Oh, it's Infinity War. One of my biggest takeaways from that movie that I still love is when Thor says the name of something, and one of the Guardians is like, "That sounds made up," and he says, "All words are made up."
Yeah.
Just offhand, and I'm like, "That's the best line in the movie," because the way he delivers it, first of all, is just amazing. But it's true. Like,
it's incredible.
I am, and I hate to use the phrase so casually, but like, what you might refer to as a spelling Nazi. I cannot stand misspellings, especially of really common words. It drives me to the point where I am difficult to deal with. Like, I'm sure that it does not come across in a constructive way when I try to tell somebody that they've spelled something wrong. But, ultimately, who's to say? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if it makes, like, when people write awkward sentences and that kind of thing, I'm like, I just get so frustrated. But I'm like, but if you understood what you were saying or you got your point across to the other person, mission accomplished,
yeah,
right?
What does it matter?
Yeah, that's communication. And I feel funny because I technically have a communications degree, and I took a lot of classes that involved that kind of stuff, and like speech classes and that kind of thing. And it was funny how you can say like you're doing it poorly, but at the same time, if you get your message across, wasn't that the point of communication to begin with?
Yeah. Yeah.
Also reminds me of Arrival, right at the beginning of Arrival, when Jeremy Renner's argument is that, I don't remember what he's physics, right? He's a physicist?
I think so. It's been a while since
he's some kind of scientist or a biologist, whatever. And Amy Adams is like the communication person, and he says that that's bullshit, basically. And he's like, science is more important.
Yeah.
And she's like, we couldn't have this conversation about it if there wasn't communication.
And that's, that's 100%. Like, high school Alex was like, oh, science and math. Those are the important things in life. And, the universe speaks in math and blah, blah, blah. But, like, obviously there's way more value. Like, I wouldn't be able to learn these things if I didn't know how to read and talk to people about things. And
yeah, I think that those things become more important the more advanced you become.
Yeah,
I think communication is very much like a developmental thing. I mean, even as a species, as a humankind, earlier in the overall lifespan of our species, communication and those sort of things were more fundamentally important. But now, like I was just watching on the news this morning, they were talking about the sea levels and all that, and they were talking about how in areas of New York they are actively working towards basically building seawalls and stuff because the levels of everything have been steadily rising.
Yeah.
And the anchor and some sort of expert who this is what they do for like the state of New York or whatever, we're standing there talking, and it just I just thought right away, like, man, this is so cool to me because people have been doing this for long enough that they can look back at the recordings and being like, and the way you can see in this month of this year, it should be here over the last 50 years or whatever in New York. And that's something that people in, the 1600s wouldn't worry about because they'd be like, we just got to get food and we got to build a society, get a society going. And now that the groundwork has been laid, we can worry about the bigger problems facing us now, like global extinction because of global warming and all that. But although I'm going to undo my own point because I was doing a lot of reading about like hundreds of years ago in the Netherlands, how they were like so brilliant at water management ahead of everyone else in the world because they had to be because the sea was always encroaching on Netherlands. And I was doing I got into this deep dive online of reading about all the advancements they made before anybody else did. And now they are like, the experts probably in the world about all that kind of stuff, to the point where this is irrelevant now with just technology. But when people would try to invade, back in the day when it was only via ship and by foot, they had strategically placed like barricades where they could release them and flood like certain areas while people were trying to come at them, and they could attack them like strategically, and they could so precisely control where they wanted to flood to try to force people into certain areas or smaller groups so they could take them apart and defend their land.
That's awesome.
I thought that's incredible. Yeah, you should read about it, but maybe listen to an audiobook about it. It was amazing.
Beautiful.
Anyway, Yoop, right in.
Yeah, Yoop.
Are you an aqua engineer?
Yes.
I'm sure there's some kind of term for that.
Did you gain your ancestors' skills?
In water management. Well, even like the way that if you look at like images of like certain villages and stuff, you see that like where there would be like roads almost, it's like waterways that are grid-like in their precision because they've shaped the land into the way they need it to be. It's amazing.
That's awesome.
I don't know how we got down that road, but anyway.
Welcome I don't know how to read, and we'll see if I can figure that out.
Yep.
But, let's get on with our recap.
Sounds good, I guess. I have very few notes this week again.
Yeah, well, we'll get through it.
I'm sure we'll find a way to talk about it for 90 minutes.
The teaser, we have a group of cave-dwelling Australians that have managed to install a spigot where Starr's genitals once were. In a dream, Starr remembers his Little Mr. Dusseldorf competition in 1979, where he won for the 4th time in a row. After the show, the rest of the contestants ganged up on him in the bathroom to beat him up and disfigure him. Starr is startled awake when the Australians try to comfort him with some food. When Starr looks down to see his leg is gone, and they're all eating his leg, he freaks out and tells the cave dwellers that the Grail is on the way. Just as they get ready to take his thigh, Featherstone bursts onto the scene to rescue him. She carries him out of the cave at sunset. Before we dig into that, Malcolm Barrett, Hoover 1, tweeted at Julianne Emery on Twitter and said, "We're like 6 minutes in, and this is the most disturbing episode of Preacher I've ever seen, and I was there for a lot of disturbing shit." Then he had a picture of Featherstone carrying Starr in the sunlight, and she said, "I'd have carried you across the field at sunrise too, my Hoover."
Beautiful.
But, so cannibals.
Yep.
And this Starr disfigurement smell of something that is straight out of the comics.
Yes.
Does this feel like fan service, or does this feel like it was important?
It feels like an attempt at fan service, I guess. So this, when Starr was in the desert laying there in the last episode and that shadow approached him and he looked up, I knew it was them.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, what? And I like messaged Bruce in the book spoilers, and I said, we might actually get the Wub thing.
Wub.
And he was like, no way. Or like, he hadn't watched it yet. And he replied eventually and was like, wow. And this week we kind of talked about it a little bit more after this episode. So I guess it serves the plot in terms of continuing to maim Starr,
to get Starr to his lowest point.
Right.
Yeah.
But as far it's over a lot quicker.
Mm.
He spends a little bit more. He's not there for long in the books. It's a similar outcome, except he gets himself out. He's not rescued.
Okay.
And it's funnier that way. Like, the way he gets out is really funny and super gross and very Preacher. And he's not rescued. So it was fine, I guess.
Yeah.
It just didn't, I don't know.
It's kind of like why.
Yeah, it kind of just didn't matter. So I was thinking about this today while I was driving to and from everywhere I was going today. I was pretty much, whenever I was in the car, I was thinking about the show. And I was like, there's a lot going on that I like. There's a lot of stories that I like the advancement in, but there's a lot that I just don't care about anymore.
Yeah.
And Starr is something that I'm like, it's fine, I guess. I'm not even getting as much enjoyment though out of Pip Torrens' portrayal.
Was the backstory, does that match track? That's just kind of show invention.
Yeah. So, I think that's part of what bothers me is like they are continuing to reinforce how kind of pathetic Starr is.
Yeah.
But I don't know why. I think I missed Pip Torrens' performance before when it was just so like
this enigmatic
and so like deliciously over the top, and he like stood out in every scene he was in as like this like just flash of lightning.
Yeah.
And now I'm just kind of like tired of it.
He's and the thing is, in this episode he's very much played for shock value. We get a lot of quote unquote naked Pip Torrens with a spigot at his genitals and wearing his sash and his nipple clamps, like,
which was a striking scene.
Well, and to be honest, as I was watching it, I was like, I'm kind of impressed that this is on basic cable.
Yeah, for
sure.
Like
at the same time, I'm just kind of like, it doesn't feel as though the shock is serving a purpose.
It's also not that shocking anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
It must be how people who read the book who didn't really love it felt at every turn of the page, because there's tons of shit like that all throughout the book where you're like, how much more grotesque and bizarre can it get?
And that's the thing. I guess I don't have a good grip of what it's like in the books, but it feels to me of like, this is what someone who read Preacher and thought it was only gross and not thought-provoking walked away with.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And then by the same token, I see an episode of the show that is incredibly thought-provoking, and I'm like, okay, what's the root of this inconsistency?
Yeah.
But I agree. It definitely reads like, or it comes across as almost like someone read the Wikipedia summary of Preacher and just Googled the images and was like, "Oh, that's."
It's like there's like a checklist of like gross stuff we got to put in Preacher, and
yeah, and I think that I kind of pity Starr a little bit in the show, and I don't like that, because in the book you don't pity him at all. You just feel like he's just an asshole.
Yeah.
Which is really the best way to put it. Like, he is evil, but evil's not even the first thing that comes to mind. You're like, you're just an asshole. And Jesse calls him an asshole a bunch of times because he's an asshole. And in the show, he's getting kind of just manipulated by God. And like, if you can't relate to that, if you can't feel bad for somebody for that, then you're just not human. Like, I feel like you can't look at that and not feel a little bit bad for him. To be like, God is dangling a carrot in front of everybody in the show, apparently.
Yeah.
And Starr just wants to like look normal again, and he gets the opposite of that at every turn, and you're like, I feel a little bad for the guy. Like, he just to literally be face to face with God and have God tell you this all the time and just treat you like Jafar basically, and just fuck with you all the time. And you're like, oh, soon, Klaus, you'll look good again. And then meanwhile, this X, everything.
Yeah.
It's just, I can't help but feel a little bad. I just, like, I don't want to watch that. I feel bad watching it. I'm like, this isn't fun. It's not funny anymore. Like, in the books, it almost comes across more as like misfortune. All these crazy stuff that happens, or you can kind of chalk it up to almost karma. And that's more fun because it feels like it's just kind of happening to him with no rhyme or reason. But when it's like your creator being like, no, I'm gonna throw sand in this guy's eye at every opportunity.
Yeah, I'm gonna sick this dingo on him because I know he's lying to me.
On the one hand, Starr is a bad guy. He's a bad guy, so he does deserve it. But at the same time, you're like, oh man, like just kill him.
I wonder if it's kind of playing towards this weird change of things for Starr, where Starr is this person that we've always kind of seen as like we've always had the log line of the reason Starr's involved with the Grail is not because of his belief in God, but because of his thirst for power,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
And so I wonder if we're playing at this weird restoration of Starr's faith because God did deliver to him in this episode. But I don't know what you're going to do with that in 2 episodes that's going to make me give a shit about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. What did you think about Pip Torrens portraying young Starr?
I liked that. I thought that was funny.
It was a really funny choice because I figured it was going to go like one of 3 ways. It was like either they do it the way they did it here, which is not what I would have expected, or they like put Pip Torrens' face on a child and they make him look pretty grotesque anyways, like he's never, like as we made the joke last week of like he's never really been that beautiful,
right?
Or they get some kind of child who looked disfigured in the first place, like it could have been any one of those 3 options, but like the fact that it was straight up just him in a wig, I was like, okay.
I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, that the first kid was him.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, flashback, there he is. And so I was pleasantly surprised that they were pulling one over, and it just whip pans over to him in this terrible wig, standing, 4 feet higher than everybody else.
All the other kids on the stage.
It was hysterical. I was like, this is good.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
I like them all bullying him too.
Yes.
Ganging up on him even though he's huge.
Yeah, Bruce wrote, he said, having adult Starr getting beat up and disfigured by kids is just strange unless he's meant to be a kid himself, and showing him as an adult is just a joke. I do think that was a joke.
I agree though that it could be confusing if it wasn't for like the year that they said, like
yes.
79 or whatever it was. But how old is Starr supposed to be?
I don't know. I can't remember much from his like.
I always got the vibe
somewhat origin.
Well, but even when
origin.
He was like a young man, like auditioning for the Grail, he was still Pip Torrens, like the same.
Yeah.
So he's kind of always looked like that.
Yeah. So it's just an interesting thought of like this dude has looked like the 50-year-old man that he is, or whatever. How old he actually is.
I was gonna say when I read it, I imagine him at like a solid 50 years old.
All right,
like he's like a seasoned dude. The thing about the star on his eye, though, like they never get into that. Like it just doesn't matter.
No,
like that's what he looks like. Okay, cool. Like bad guy.
Pip Torrens is 59 years old.
Sure,
but
yeah, I would always put Starr at like 50-ish.
I want to see if I can find a picture of Pip Torrens as child. Let's see. I don't think there's anything, unfortunately.
No,
but
I just tried to Google something about the show, and one of the first links was a article. The final season of Preacher has been a chore. So these are the kind of things that are coming up if you Google it right now.
Yeah,
I might read that later because I'm sure that I will agree with parts of it and disagree with parts of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, it was a fun little joke, but it was a little bit weird. It was a little off-putting. There was part of me that as I was watching it, I was kind of like, okay. It feels a little lazy to me. Like, it's a funny joke, but it also just feels kind of like, we're not going to find somebody, we don't want to find anybody that looks like they could be a young Pip Torrens. Like, I don't know. I guess it's hard because they could have also gone the route of like, we need to find the most beautiful child in the world, and then somehow they end up looking like Pip Torrens by the time he gets to the Grail, after he gets mutilated or whatever in the bathroom. So yeah, I don't know. Featherstone being the hero was fun enough.
Yeah, the shot of her carrying Starr was like almost worth it. I was like, oh, that's kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Act 1. Jesse still refuses to take God's throne, opting to go back to watching his father die repeatedly. Fiora informs him that there's worse in store now, from a tube of ants straight up his ass to being engulfed in flames and maybe more. We cut to Tulip, Cassidy, and Humperdew driving in a storm that Cassidy remarks is Old Testament-like, making Tulip think maybe God is watching them. They get out of the car, and Tulip holds a gun to Humperdew's head, waiting for something. Cassidy tells her to do it since God is always watching, but Tulip opts not to, as she wants to watch God watching them kill Humperdew. She vows not to leave until God makes his move. 3 months later, they're living out of the house they pulled over by. Cassidy has really taken a liking to Humperdew, while Tulip remains distant. She checks a vest of explosives on his chest and tells him it's time to go to the moon. Humperdew runs outside and gets into a refrigerator to prepare himself for blast-off. Tulip reminds Cassidy of what they're there to do when the time comes. Yeah, I didn't really ever believe Jesse would take the throne.
Yeah.
Given who Jesse is as a character and what he believes. Yep. I didn't think that would happen, so I wasn't surprised there. What did you think of the Tulip, Cassidy, and Humperdew?
I really liked it.
It was great.
I really liked it way more than I thought it would.
The Pinecone family and everything as they come in from gathering wood. There's a weird amount of chemistry between the three of them that works way better than it should.
Honestly, I think Joe Gilgan is the catalyst. That guy could act.
He's the glue.
He could act opposite tennis balls, and it would be engaging. He's a treasure. Yeah.
No, it was quite good.
And Tyson Ritter is really good.
Yeah. The fact that he's just down to be okay, I'm gonna play this inbred descendant of Christ.
And Christ.
He's like, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do this.
That's my wheelhouse. I can get there. Yeah, because he plays them both so well, and they're both really endearing. Even though Humperdew should be so irritating, he should not be endearing at all. Everybody's reaction to him in the book is ugh. Oh, there he is. Although he's way, I don't want to say he's way worse looking. He's doesn't look great in the show, but in the book he just looks more cartoonish. He doesn't even look. It's like an even meaner version. You could tell that. I think the creators probably said some pretty off-color stuff while they were creating it, because it's pretty mean. But at the same time, he's treated like such a joke because of the whole notion of keeping that bloodline pure is a joke. It's disgusting, and yet it's not outside the realm of possibility that somebody would be like, yeah, we got to do that.
The thing is that he plays both of them. Tyson Ritter plays both of them in very different ways. Obviously, they are very different characters, but he's endearing for different reasons for both of them. Any Jesus, I feel there's a lot of, at least in my mind share, for what you would think of Jesus would be the traditionally handsome,
very stoic.
I'm stoic but charismatic, and but that I feel Ritter's performance is just very understated. Hey, I'm Jesus,
right? Regular guy,
and it works extremely well for some reason.
It makes me bummed out that we haven't seen more portrayals of Jesus like that, because by the time we see him as an adult in movies, he's usually always very just collected and wise and soft-spoken and very And if you look at the list of dudes who have played Jesus, all these AAA Hollywood guys, they all play it that way for the most part, which is
I think
generally
there's so much fear of if you're irreverent. There's so much inherently questionable about someone taking on that role.
Yeah. Well, and then I think the idea of humanizing him is probably really appealing to actors, but I think that people who want to make money from movies are probably no, you gotta play Christ as though he's already died and risen. You gotta be like that from the start. And I like this portrayal a lot.
Yeah, the fact that there's Jesus who calls him dad, is that's 90% of the way for me. I'm okay, I get it.
Yeah, I would love to actually see. I mean, it wouldn't work without the same kind of creative team behind it, but a portrayal of Jesus as a more scared man. It was someone who is conflicted all the time about being the son of.
Wasn't there
God.
A show?
I guess Jesus Christ Superstar has a lot of that. Which Bruce actually posted a song from Jesus Christ Superstar in the Discord at one point, which I thought was great. Have you ever seen it?
I have not.
The movie?
No.
I didn't see it until my wife showed it to me years ago, probably 5 years ago. And I like it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's a cool idea. And most of the music is pretty great.
No, I've always wanted to see it. I know it's one of Ben Folds' favorite musicals, as he aped a little bit of it off of from one of the Ben Folds 5 albums. But
that makes sense. It is very dynamic at times. Like,
yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
So one of these days I will probably get around to it. I was thinking of a show called John from Cincinnati. I feel like I remember hearing that was like, I don't know. I'm going way overboard here, and I have no idea anything about the show, so I'm not going to say anything about it. But anyway, look that up. But no, like the idea of like a more down to earth Jesus.
I love it.
I wonder if anybody knows of any portrayals out there, anything that kind of plays in that realm. Let us know, because maybe there's something out there that we don't know about. But
that's true. And most of the like Jesus-y movies I have seen in my life were when I was a little younger, so I could probably come at it from a different point of view now. And maybe
when you're not looking up at him as like, you know,
when you're not a kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, anything else about that? Not a whole lot to talk about.
I loved the when Tulip's like, I want to do it in front of him, and Cassie's like, we are in front of him. He's God.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's my question, though.
Yeah.
Is he?
We don't know.
Are you in front of him? Yeah. And I was like, Cassidy clearly thinks so. And I think Cassidy is often the audience's perspective on most situations in some ways.
We're playing very fast and loose with all of that. Like, I said something about the fact that Jesse dying, like, how is Genesis still with him?
Yeah.
And, you know, they obviously don't really, maybe they don't have the time, or maybe they just don't care to, like, establish, like,
they also might
just
be saying,
rules.
like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So
it's Genesis. It's God. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You don't need to know.
Yeah.
Which we talked about also.
Yeah.
I'm going to just tell myself that's what they're saying for now.
Until there's evidence to the contrary.
That was cool, though, how the rain just stopped.
Yeah.
Which, to me, signaled he was aware.
He was there. Yeah.
And was just calling their bluff.
Yeah.
Saying, all right, if it's so easy, do it. And honestly, if they didn't do it then, they were never going to, because the more time you spend with him, clearly,
the more attached you'll be.
Yeah.
All right, in Act 2, Herr Starr returns to Masada to have Hitler and Jesus pitch him on using Jesus as the Messiah, since Humperdinck cannot be found. After a brief breakdancing sequence, Starr calls them off, letting them know that it's not up to him and that God wants Humperdinck, not Jesus. Tulip and Cassidy search the woods after Cassidy loses track of Humperdinck after peeing. They start to argue. They look over and see Humperdinck doing his best Disney princess impression with 2 deer practically eating out of his hands. Cassidy calls Humperdinck back, explaining they'll have to check him for ticks, and Tulip looks relieved to have found Humperdinck, but also worried about Cassidy's close relationship with him. Yeah.
All right. Well, at the beginning of that, yeah, Starr showing up bearded and with a prosthetic leg, and interesting.
I didn't know if the squeak was his leg, or if that was also meant to be his genitals as well.
Faucet.
Yeah, but breakdancing Jesus was good.
Now we've gone from Jesus tap dancing Christ to Jesus breakdancing Christ.
Yeah. That was quite good. The fact, like, how much what was my note here?
Oh, the way that he and Hitler had clearly practiced this moment was amazing. How Hitler's like helps him get his robes off.
Yes. One of my notes here is Hitler cheers them on like a dance mom.
Yeah, they clearly had run through it together, like, okay, and then you'll say this, and I'll say, and then help me take my robe off. It reminded me of like when 2 little kids would like practice like putting on a show in their room, and then they'd run out to their parents and be like, look it, and they would run through it, and you'd just be like, this is clumsy and adorable, but ultimately not good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was exactly like that.
It was very funny. I liked the choice of breakdancing. And like the piece of cardboard and everything.
Yes, yeah.
So good. And the wardrobe.
Star's line of, it's not up to me, so save your ghetto gyrations for someone whose dick doesn't require constant descaling.
Yeah. That made me laugh, because I was like, all right, there's a little bit of the old Starr magic. He just needs that dialogue. He needs those crazy lines, like the things that nobody in real life would ever say.
Mm-hmm. And then, just Cassidy walking around the woods yelling out, "Hump!"
Yeah.
hump. It's like, all right. This
and
shouldn't
then the
work,
shot of
but it
him in the
does.
meadow
Yeah.
in the clearing with these deer. So funny.
Yes. Yeah.
And all of Cassidy's dialogue after that was biblical, man. He just keeps on it was biblical. He's like, we're going to have to check you for ticks. And Humperdew seems to understand. He's like bummed out. He's like, well, it is what it is. And I just love the relationship. It's like one part brotherly, one part like fatherly.
Yeah.
It's just really, really funny.
It's
and
like
Tulip is just,
it's like fulfillment of what he thought life with Dennis was gonna be.
that's
in
true.
some way, a more receptive son. But man,
it is very
remember when Dennis was in the show?
barely.
God, feels like eons ago.
Right. It's so far in the rear view, and yet it's not.
No,
It was 2 years ago.
wow.
I mean, these last 2 years have been really busy. So
True.
a lot of shit has gone down in these last 2 years.
But even just in like the parlance of the show,
oh yeah,
like season 1, I remember at one point, I think during season 2, I had gone back to watch through all of season 1 and season 2 in preparation for our season wrap up that we never did for season 2. And
there's still time.
at that point, season 1 felt like just a completely different show. But I feel like as we kind of move back through, it'll be interesting if we can like pick a couple episodes to kind of refresh our brains on what the journey's been like before we talk about everything.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Because, man.
Each season has been really distinctly different.
Absolutely.
Now that I think about it.
Yeah.
I think 3 is my favorite so far.
Yeah.
1 is really cool.
Yeah.
Even 2 is not bad. It's fine.
2 is okay. It just
2 is like
shorter.
most season 2s of most shows, I feel like.
Yeah.
3 is quite good.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe the most
3 feels
representative of
and it feels like it struck the right balance between staying true to the book and also adapting.
expanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about this season now and thinking about, at some point they were faced with a decision of like, okay, listen, we've been renewed for 1 more. We got to wrap it up.
What are we going to pull off?
Right. And I'm wondering, like, I mean, looking back at the previous 3 seasons, I don't really see much of anything that has been like part of the overall through line of the show. Like, it feels like each season was kind of its own self-contained thing.
Yeah.
And like season 2, as much as it was kind of a drag, it was the only one where Jesse was like, I gotta find God to confront him. Even when he does confront him in this episode, I was like, oh, it's finally,
I was like, this is it.
it's finally
right?
happening. And it was so
Perfunctory.
not what I expected at all. I was like, why is Jesse groveling at first? Like, it just was the complete antithesis of the book, that it kind of was off-putting.
Well, and that's kind of the weird thing that I was gonna that I maybe kind of want to ask about, but not necessarily have you answer, is like, we're almost getting this, like, from our previous discussions, I had this indication of like Jesse needs to talk to God, and that is what we're getting to.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like the show has made this like a 2-part encounter of like Jesse's talked with God, found out that God is an asshole for sure, and now he's going to come back later with Genesis, is kind of the indication that I'm getting, that like by episode 10 there's going to be some actual confrontation, quote unquote, but who knows.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I'm so muddy on Jesse's entire character at this point, because I feel like season to season he's kind of ping-ponged around between like good and like faithful son to God, and then like angry and like I need answers, more of the Jesse that we expected from the books. Like by the end of season 1, by the finale, I was like, okay, he's there.
Yep.
And in season 2, he spent most of the time, and then in 3, he's kind of not really worried about it. He still is like, oh, we got to find God. And then 4, all of a sudden now he's kind of like going back to like, I want to be good. I want God to like me, basically, instead of like, I want God to explain himself. And he gets there by the end of the scene. But at the same time, I'm like, what have we been doing the last 3 seasons? Like, I thought that we were already at that point.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that like we don't, it feels like Jesse still doesn't realize that everything he's experienced this season has been manipulated by God to push him one way or another. And I feel like that realization should have happened in the plane, when they were headed to God. But I who knows? Like, there's some type of cognitive dissonance, and maybe being brought into hell and experiencing these cosmic forces, and the idea of being dead itself kind of like, maybe when you're faced with death as someone who believes, you default back to what you hope is true, right? And so maybe that's why Jesse is quick to give God that moment that he rewound of Abraham, kneeling down, and
he's just so glad to see him at that point instead of being in hell.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, we've seen enough movies about like prison and stuff. There's like it'll be somebody really rebellious, and they throw them in the hole for 30 days, and then they come out and they're good.
Yeah.
They're docile.
Yeah. So I don't know, but we can
maybe
come back.
this was God's version of trying to break the wild horse that is Jesse.
Yeah, that was the carving the vagina into his soul. Yeah. Like, he was trying to, but at the same time, like, I don't know. There's still such a big question mark of like, what did God expect to happen in this interaction?
Yeah, well, we just jumped ahead, didn't we?
We did a little bit, so we'll get there.
Okay.
We'll come back.
We'll repeat all that later.
I will cut it out and then paste. No, I'm not going to do that. Act 3, a drunken, dejected, and naked-haired Starr decides to try and kill himself. He ties his little Mr. Dusseldorf 1979 sash to the overhead lighting in his office and ties it around his neck like a noose. After closing his hands in handcuffs, he steps off the table only to find that he didn't tie the sash tight enough. As he falls from the sash, it catches his nipple chains and rips off both of his nipples. As Starr lays in a pile of his own urine, we see God appear in a reflection of that urine. He still promises to restore Starr's beauty if he retrieves Humperdoo. Starr doesn't know where Humperdoo is, but God says he just has to ask. Jesse waits in a rat-infested barrel when he hears screams and gunshots outside of his cell. The Saint of Killers has come to collect him. Jesse and the Saint rest up at night near a campfire. When the Saint tells a story about a drunken general who misled his men, Jesse realizes that the Saint has never talked to him this much before, and that he still hears screams. He comes to on the floor of God's office once again, with Fior and his band of angels, now demons, forced to foist him upon God's throne themselves. When they do, we hear God tell Jesse to live, causing him to dig himself out of his grave in the Australian outback. Starr's attempted suicide.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Yeah, pretty much. I did like that God appeared in the urine.
Right.
Like, that was a pretty good reflection shot.
I liked that he chose the sash. It was like that made me chuckle.
He still had the sash.
Yeah, it's so pathetic. That's whatever. The sight of the chains hanging there with like the little bits of nipple, I was like, imagine this set. Like, walk out of the set of the show and just being like, yep.
Well, his nipples aren't quite bloody enough.
Yeah, exactly.
They're
really not reading on camera.
Yeah. Why does God know where Humperdoo is? What does it matter? Who cares? Why? Like, what is the...
We're, I think, at the point as audience members where a bingeable format of this show might be better.
Yeah.
Because it does feel like
we're left in the lurch each week, kind of like grasping for it.
And I'm willing to bet it's going to pay off, but I'm just like...
I'm real worried about episode 9.
This is the way I feel watching Game of Thrones. I am not a fan of Game of Thrones. And when I was watching it week to week, I was like, this show is not good. Why does everyone like it? I'm like, nothing happens until episode 9.
Yeah.
You spend all these episodes of just people looking at each other and being degenerates. And then like you get to episode 9, there's a big fight.
Several people die.
Yeah. And then you get a little bit of falling action and setting up the chess pieces again. And then there's a whole nother season of that shit. Now every time I was like, what am I missing? But anyway, I liked season 1. Was really good.
Yeah.
But then you got Sean Bean. You lose Sean Bean. I mean,
yeah. Spoiler.
Yeah, for 8 years ago, 9 years ago, whatever it was.
Yeah. Like
anyway, yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Like some not in this era of like TV binging. I feel like not all shows are good week to week, and some shows suffer from being binged, and some are a little bit better. Actually, I think they all suffer, but so does Netflix apparently, because now they're experimenting with releasing things
weekly instead of all at once,
which I think is a great idea. But I'm afraid that we're too far down now, where people are just angry because they're like, I want to watch it all now, and they're just like, I saw so many people online freaking out, like, I don't want to just watch one episode of the Great British Bake Off. I want to watch 3. And like, while I get that, we've been conditioned now in a very short time span.
Oh yeah,
to expect this. Like, people do this with animals in cages with
I was
food.
talking with somebody at work about Lost and the fact that, like, because my mom used to watch it. I kind of really only caught bits and pieces of it here and there. That was a show where they took their off weeks to show you recaps of what was going on with that show.
Yeah.
Like, Nicole and I watched like a show on ABC. I think it's called A Million Little Things. And when it's on the air, like, they did one season last year so far, and season 2 is going to air soon. But like, there's weeks where they don't have an episode, and it's like, I'm like, how did we live like this? Because I want to watch it all now. Like, we just caught up on Succession and we watched this week's episode, and I was like, there's not another one to watch when I get home today.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, when I was a kid, I used to be critical of the idea of, like, just in my household, we didn't have like a show. I mean, maybe having parents that were divorced was a factor because you were kind of in different places sometimes, but it wasn't like, Monday nights at 8, the whole family gathered around and watched whatever.
Yeah.
We just never did that. And I was always very judgmental of people where I was like, I don't base my nights around television. And like, what an asshole,
plebes.
first of all. Yeah, exactly. I was reading so I could criticize your spelling later in life, 30 years later. But now I kind of get it, because you do all the stuff you have to do that day. That's your 30-minute reward. Mm-hmm. And then you go about your week, and you do the rest of the stuff you have to do throughout the week, and you don't watch TV for 5 hours every night. And now that's just the model now, which is crazy. That it's like normal. and I totally get it. Like, on the one hand, it's great, but I also think that the old model of TV was awesome, because you would have more time to digest it, to mull it over, and your brain could retain it. Like, I still remember so many more details of watching Lost week to week than I do of, like, whatever the last show is that I just binged on TV, because, like, Daredevil season 3, we'll say. I mean, I stopped watching it after episode like 7, and I just went back a few weeks ago and finally finished it. I watched like 5 episodes in like a weekend or whatever. But like, I don't retain it the same way, because I think your brain needs the time to kind of like bake it
internalize.
Yeah, exactly. And if you immediately push it out with the latest episode you just watched, it doesn't have time to register.
Well, and the weird thing is, to me, not only that, but like, you would think there's some kind of, I wonder what kind of adjustments in like plotting out a season of television has undergone.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
There was still the point of like, we like cliffhangers because we want you to come back next week. And so in this world that we live in, where Netflix drops a whole season at once, they still program to like, we want you to hit that skip to next episode button.
Yeah, we want you to hit again. Like,
so you would think there's not that fundamental of a shift, but it feels like there has to be something that they're doing different in terms of just like the overall plotting of a season.
Oh yeah, well, I look at this you brought it back full circle.
Yeah,
thank you. I was thinking about this morning. I'm like, okay, what is wrong with the season of Preacher? And I was thinking, okay, every episode of a show should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Each episode, like I was comparing it to the comic, and I was like, if I was reading an issue of Preacher, the comic, I feel like every issue you could chart out a beginning, a middle, and an end. You could chart where characters are being pushed along, where the story is being advanced. You could probably, I'm sure somebody who is a writer, who is an English major or something, could draw out a really wonderful diagram of what is supposed to happen in each issue of a comic, each episode of a TV show, whatever. Kind of like, there's a really cool video on YouTube of Christopher Nolan in like a classroom somewhere with like a chalkboard, writing out the entire story structure of Memento, like in like a diagram, and it's amazing. I don't have much of an attention span, because see the last 5 minutes we just talked about, but on this video, especially on YouTube, if you send me a YouTube link, you came and watch this, and it's more than 30 seconds, the odds are
You're
really
like,
good. I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I'll watch it later, and then never watch it, or start it so I can like reference it and be like, oh, I love that one line, and then move on. But this video is like 20 minutes, and I watched the whole thing one day, just in a shot, because it's so cool, and he just so confidently and it was like years after the movie was out. Somebody was like, oh, explain it. And he was like, okay, and like grabbed a piece of chalk. And it's so weird because you're like, was he at parent-teacher conferences? Like, what's going on? He's in like a classroom. But it's really good. And he draws out the whole thing, and it's really cool to watch, and it makes you appreciate the movie even more if possible. But I would love to see somebody do that with like, you know, just what the structure of a good story should be in terms of episodic content like this. But I was thinking about this show as it applies to this show on my drive into work this morning, and I was like, does this last episode have a beginning, a middle, and an end? And I was like, I guess in terms of Jesse, it does. In the beginning, he's in hell. In the middle, he's tempted again. He has a confrontation. At the end, he's brought back to life. He has this conversation with God, and he's brought back to his friends. That feels like a full episode journey for Jesse.
Yeah.
But then I think about like Tulip and Cassie. Do they? Kind of. They bring Humperdoo to the house. They're at the house with Humperdoo, and they have a routine, and then he's taken away, and their new objective is to go get him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. And then I think about Starr, and I'm like, does he? Even less so, kind of. Like, he's Starr.
He gets rescued. And he tries to kill himself. Then he succeeds.
And God gives him his looks back, kind of. And like, but it's, you know what I mean? It starts to get unclear here. I'm like, is that a story? Is that an arc? I guess, but
it feels like story elements thrown together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, so if I chart it out like that, I feel like, okay, that feels satisfactory. That feels like even just those three groups of characters, right? But then why do I not feel that? Like the momentum of that is not evident to me.
Well, and that's one of the things that I wanted to know about this episode, and especially later on with our favorite character, Eugene.
Yeah.
And this whole season, we've been getting these bits and pieces of moments. Like even in this episode, we see a little bit of Jesse with the ants, and then it cuts away. We see some Starr, we see some Cassidy and Tulip and Humperdoo, and then it comes back to Jesse, and he's like on fire in hell. And then we leave Jesse again. And you're not even really getting this, like, what is Jesse really experiencing here? How is he feeling it? What is it doing to who he is as a person?
Yep.
You just gloss over it, like Jesse's getting tortured. Like the fact that I can sum up those bits as Jesse gets tortured in hell shows how kind of mundane and pointless they were to me, the viewer.
Yeah, that was running through my mind earlier, too. It was like, Jesse at this point in the show, because they've had that one season restraint put on them.
Yeah.
He's not even, we don't get to see him react to anything. He is being moved from plot point to plot point to plot point so quickly. And we don't get to spend any time with him, like internalizing anything or watching him react to anything. It's just like, that feels like the way the whole season has been, with the exception of like the raft. I think we got to see some of that. We have gotten moments, but especially in this episode, I'm like, this feels like something that we should talk about. Are we even watching him bounce off somebody else in hell? But Jesse Custer is a tricky character because he doesn't really do that in the books. Like he doesn't. In this sequence, actually, when he was talking to Fior, that old like Jesse Custer defiance is there. It's great. What is he had one line I wrote down. Oh, when he's like, I like biscuits. Back to Fior. That was perfect. That was such a perfect line. I was like, that could pretty much come out of the books. Like
Bruce brought that one up too.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you've read the book, you're like, yeah, that's pitch perfect. Like that's exactly the kind of thing he would say. And in the face of all this, just be like, whatever. I like biscuits is spot on.
Yeah.
So I'm so torn because I want to see. We've left the comic behind in terms of how these people are characterized. We've gone much deeper with them. So I want to see a little bit of that. I want to see the effect it's having on Jesse. And we kind of do, I guess, when he's talking to God, because he seems pretty broken by that point.
Yeah.
And he's just putting on a brave face for these 3 months he's been in hell, which probably feel like a lot longer.
An eternity,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Jesse pulling himself out of the grave was pretty good. Bruce called it the end of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which I've never seen, so I can't really.
I've seen it a number of times. I just can't put together what part he's talking about.
Yeah, but
that movie, I saw that in the theater up north. I think in Sheboygan, because I remember that came out in 2003. That seems a little late. Maybe it's 2001. I feel like it's an odd number.
2003.
2003. Shit, that's stupid. I remember being up north and my grandpa reading the paper and looking up the movie showtimes, and he was like, "Oh, this movie looks cool." Like, we went to see it.
You know what's great?
It's not very cool.
I also saw a movie in Sheboygan that same summer, and it was Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines.
No! Another winner.
That was July 2nd, and Leave Extraordinary Gentlemen was July 11th. So
Oh
we could have been there at the same
dude. That's
in the
wild.
same nexus of time.
Did your family have a place up there somewhere?
My uncle has a cabin on Black Lake, it's like maybe 40 minutes from Sheboygan or so. So sometimes we'd hop over to go see a movie.
Okay. Is it east of the bridge?
I couldn't tell you, honestly.
Okay.
I don't know that I've looked at it on a map since I've been able to internalize what a map is.
Okay.
But
gotcha.
Yeah.
It does involve reading. So
yeah, true. There's things on a page.
That's crazy to think that we might have been up there at the same. We were likely up there at the same summer,
Yeah.
if not even like around Sheboygan at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know when during League of Extraordinary Gentlemen's run I was up
You would
there.
have seen
It came out in July.
Yeah. At what point does it get to Sheboygan?
We were probably
Sheboygan.
there in August.
Yeah.
It's generally when we were up north.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Those are two good up north movies.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. Those are movies you see in the city.
Yeah.
You go up north. You go where they have two screens, and
Oh yeah, and there's probably a line.
those are
running
your
through
two
one of them.
choices.
Yes. Beautiful.
Say damned if we do, damned if we don't.
Sean Connery or Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Act 4. Featherstone and Starr get the jump on Cassidy, Tulip, and Humperdew as they sit down to eat blueberry hamburgers that Tulip has prepared. They use sonic nauseators to make Humperdew and Cassidy vomit as Tulip realizes what's going on. Tulip tells Humperdew to go to the moon when Featherstone bursts in. Tulip vomits and gets pistol whipped by Featherstone, and Cassidy slips in the vomit. Featherstone and Starr leave the house to get to the Christ child outside, and when Tulip requests the detonator from Cassidy, he won't willingly give it up, so she buries an axe in his chest to disable him. She runs up to the window with the detonator, but she hesitates when she sees Humperdew in the fridge. As he is getting pulled away, she tries to detonate the vest, but it doesn't work. Tulip tells Cassidy they have to go get him, and Cassidy wonders if it's to save him or kill him. Meanwhile, Jesse walks the desert when he spots an RV on the horizon. After flagging it down, it heads towards him, and he realizes that God is the one driving it. God gets out of the RV and starts heading to Jesse, exclaiming, "Hello, my child." Blueberry hamburger's something I'd be willing to try. We'll just put it out there. I like blueberries.
I love blueberries.
It could be okay. But I liked how Joe takes one bite of it and then does not chew ever again in that entire scene until he throws up. He's just holding it in his cheek the entire time. Humperdew's like, pulling it apart and eating it a little bit.
I wonder if was it a beef patty with blueberries on top, or was it a patty made of blueberries?
I think it was a beef patty with blueberries on top was the idea, but I don't know.
Why?
I don't know for sure.
Whatever.
I mean, yeah. I couldn't remember if there were any other jokes about Tulip cooking previously.
Probably.
I think there might have been, but sonic nauseators, good.
Fine.
People throwing up on each other.
Yeah, always
Once
good.
again, feels like it's just meant to be gross, but okay. Yep. Tulip being unable to. So it was interesting. I looked at the subreddit, and somebody commented that they liked the 3 fake outs, quote unquote, of the episode. One of which was Starr, the child who was supposedly Starr, and then they show you that it's really just Starr. And then there was another one, and then the third one was this, and they said that Tulip, seeming like she wasn't able to kill him, but then trying to press the button.
And for it to not work.
But, like, I guess my question is, did you feel as though she hesitated because of a connection to Humperdoo, or do you think it was meant to be played for the laugh that guy apparently got on Reddit somewhere?
No, I think it was because she hesitated because she views him as a person, not a bargaining chip.
Yeah.
And they even say earlier in the episode that he's like growing on them, and she's like, she says he's adorable.
He's adorable.
At one point, and yeah, she likes him.
But we have to remember, yeah.
I think that, she probably reached. I was talking last week about her like backslide into like violence and all that, and I think she probably reached her lowest point here, where she was willing to blow up an innocent. And we don't really spend any time with her after that. I mean, she was gonna do it.
Yeah.
She pushed the button. She wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And she did. It didn't work, which is like almost even worse. That now she has to live with.
I would have done that.
I would have blown him up, and he'd be dead if it wasn't for it not working. And like, I'd love to see her dealing with that a little bit, and we're not going to for sure, because like it just moves on, and we get another joke scene between her and Cassidy, and that's it. So she's just gonna be like, yeah, whatever. All right, now we got to go save him.
Yeah.
Rather than be like, oh, I would have killed him.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever.
Cassidy being like, it's gonna suck getting this axe out.
Yeah. Saying he was mansplaining. That's good.
That's pretty good. And then Jesse flagging down God. We can just get right into that. Okay. God assures Jesse that he's the real deal, not some trick in hell. Jesse is so happy he thinks his whole life has been a test, and he passed. He's on his knees embracing God just like Abraham. God tells him he got so close, but he sinned in his heart when he wanted to take the throne. Jesse thinks it's bullshit that God would end the world because he was tempted. God remarks about free will and how he made humans in his image, and a little thanks would be nice, but Jesse talks back asking what to give thanks for, kids with cancer or the Kardashians? God asks if Jesse's father raised him to look his Lord right in the eye, and then sucks out Jesse's eye. This creation has been a nice run, but it's time for the apocalypse, and Jesse and his friends still have a part to play. So I'll stop there before we get to the other two sequences.
Okay.
Yeah, this felt very anticlimactic to me. Is this how Jesse loses his eye in the comic also?
Yes.
Okay, so it is God removing his eye.
Yes, because he's pissed at him. It's actually pretty similar in terms of like, I think he even says something like that, like you're ungrateful, basically. Yeah. But it doesn't work.
It was missing an impact that I was expecting.
It doesn't work because they tried to do the book and they tried to do the show at the same time, and that doesn't work. That's blueberry burgers. Like, that doesn't work. And
is this an episode of Blueberry Burgers?
No, this is an episode of That Doesn't Work. No, it works really well in the book, and it could work in the show. I just think it doesn't. I shouldn't say it doesn't. No, it doesn't work, but it might work when the series ends. The big lingering question is, what the hell is God's plan?
Yeah.
What is he driving? I mean, we know what he's driving toward, but he's like, you have a part to play still, and he like leaves. I mean, in the book, these events are all compounded. Jesse falls out of the plane. We think he's dead. And then the book carries on for a little while, and then you catch up with him later.
Yeah.
And he doesn't go to hell or any of that. He does have a conversation with God. It does go down very similarly, but God is once again telling him to leave him alone.
Mm-hmm.
And he does rip out his eye, but he doesn't leave Jesse because he's done talking to him. He's interrupted by something he doesn't want to deal with. And it's really, really good in the book, and I thought it was going to happen in the show. I extra thought it was going to happen based on what happened his last week, the one where he fell out of the plane, or 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago.
Last week.
Why do I not even know? Anyway, whatever.
No, 2 weeks ago.
There was a clue visually based around that I thought something was going to happen, and it didn't. Oh, yeah, it was 2 weeks, because last week was when he was in heaven. So,
yep.
And it didn't, and I'm so bummed because like it is. obviously where they're going now is not the same ending as the book. Like, that seems really clear to me now, because if they are doing that, they're missing a lot of really, really good opportunities to kind of lay some foundations of things that will get us there eventually.
Later, yeah.
And it's just, once again, it's so much better in the book. Even the conversation is better.
Yeah.
It's better written, and it's better visually. And I'm really bummed because I love what Mark Harlick is doing. Like, it's really cool that this has turned into like a character.
I was going to ask you, like, do you think how much of your interpretation of this has to do with God being an actual character? Like, presumably in the book, you get a little bit of backstory about God, but this interaction is probably the first time you like see God, right? Or close to it.
Yes. You mean in the book?
Yeah.
You do see him before, but you don't. Actually, this is probably the first time you see what he looks like.
Okay.
Because other times when he's there talking to characters, it's usually just like
a glow from off.
They are cast in like a golden light, or you see like an arm.
A finger.
Yeah, you see an arm pointing. Yeah, exactly. It's really funny, actually. And like a command, but I think this might be the first time where you see him full on.
But you're not spending time with him. You're not wondering what his motivations are necessarily, other than the big question of why did he leave. Like any like it feels weird to me that we have this context of God is trying to pull off some plan.
Well, and the thing is, the show is making God shittier than he is in the comic, because in the comic, he just is like kind of, at least my read on it is he's disappointed in us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's trying to, you kind of
he's not replacing us.
You kind of get where he's coming from.
Yeah.
He's like, this is what has happened. And then you get where the other characters are coming from, because they're like, you started this, like, help us fix it, or like guide us back to being good again, kind of thing. You can't just leave. You got to help fix what you broke. And you get both sides of the argument. In the show, he's like, it's not working out, like, whatever. And like, well, I do kind of understand that. At the same time, you can't possibly look at humanity and be like, oh, it's just a, bad sketch
just
idea.
Went wrong. Like 2,000 years later, you're like, this went wrong, right?
Right, exactly.
So and that's the thing. Like, I think we talked about how it was weird that Genesis escaping was the catalyst for God to leave.
But he's never talked about Genesis.
Yeah, so we haven't quite figured out what's going to happen with that yet. And the fact that Jesse doesn't use Genesis at all here was weird to me too. Like it,
and that's why they talk when they do in the book, because he can talk to him face to face because he's dead. He can't use it.
Yeah,
and
they undid that without. Right. Yeah, like what was the point of that?
Well, plus the show, he's shittier in the show because he's also like a walking terms of service clause. The way he treats Jesse, he's like, oh, well, you sinned in your heart. Yeah. You can't do that. And Jesse's like, fucking what? We all do that. Like, that's human. That's being human, is being tempted. He's like, it doesn't matter what I was thinking and what right? I mean, what matters is what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And God's like, well, sorry, man. Like, that's the way. That's the way it goes. I gotta scorch everything now.
I think that's softened with time a little bit too. I think some of the puritanical, like, that's a very puritanical God that you're looking at right there. The idea of like these impure thoughts, these white lies and things that you're telling are ultimately the reason you're not going to heaven.
Right. It's like the game is rigged. I mean, and Jesse even says, like,
absolutely,
you make it seem like there was never even a chance.
Yes.
Which, if that's true, what's the point?
What's the point of it all? So in some, I think it comes born out of two things. It comes out of like a puritanical interpretation of who God is, like fear of God, and that's what the name of the episode is fear of the Lord. Yeah. But then there's also a little bit of the militant atheist, our atheism person who's like, God is clearly this petulant about the creation that he's made, and that type of thing. So that thesis is maybe that's where God is in the creators of the show's mind, rather than Ennis and Dylan's kind of interpretation of everything.
Yeah, it's just not interesting. It's not as interesting as it is in the book. And I mean, the book has been written. You've been adapting the book.
There. Well,
use the book. Look at the book and see what works.
We've got at least another 90 minutes of show, if not more, left. And I get what you're saying. It feels like we're vastly off track, but...
And like I said at the very beginning of this segment, where the series ends will likely recontextualize some of these moments.
Yes.
Which is why I'm not like completely despairing.
This podcast is over now.
Yeah, episode 8.
We're done. Fuck this.
Pack up everything. Go home.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of strictly comic fan, this scene was very dissatisfying because it's a huge moment in the book and it felt underwhelming, like you said.
I felt it too, as somebody just watching.
And it's some of Dominic Cooper's best stuff in the season, which is great. Like that look in his eye when God tells him that, he just kind of narrows his eye. Like, what? Like, kind of looks up at him like, "Are you serious?"
Yeah. But it's very much like a meeting that we have been anticipating since the end of season 1.
Well,
even,
and I had to say to myself out loud, like, "Oh, this is the first time they've met. Like, this should be huge."
Yes.
Like the wide shot of God approaching him, I was like, "Oh, this is it. This is that. Okay, like." Cool.
I wasn't necessarily expecting it in episode 8 of the season, which is why part of me is
I'm glad it did.
I think the episode 10 or whatever it will be, whatever their next meeting will be, is going to be where the sparks fly. And
if they have one.
Yeah.
They might not.
So, we shall see. The rest of Act 5, Starr brings Humperdoo back to Masada, and we see him restored to his full beauty, a full head of blonde hair and no scar on his eye. He announces that the apocalypse has an air date, while Hitler and Jesus look a little disappointed. We cut back to the first scene of the season with Tulip and Cassidy in the hotel room preparing for something. We also cut over to Eugene picking up a guitar in prison. Back to Tulip and Cassidy. They finally slept together again, it seems, and Cassidy finally seems happy when there's a knock at the door. It's Jesse, and Tulip runs right back into his arms, causing Cassidy to snicker.
So they're back at Masada. Basically.
They're back at the Holy Bar and Grail.
Yes. And we still hear, if you had the captions on, you see like captions that say like woman yelling and like screaming. The angel and the devil are still going at it, I think. I think they're still killing each other.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
because when there's a knock at the door, Cassidy
says, "I'll help you with the bodies tomorrow," or whatever he says.
I think they're still fighting down there.
Well, and Tulip's question to him is something like, "Your guy can get us in," so I think they're going to use the angel to get back into Masada.
Yes,
is the idea.
Yep.
So that's interesting. I didn't put that together with the fighting that was going on in the background, but
when the season started and that scene showed the first time, I saw those in the captions and I thought it was somebody being tortured next door, and I was like, okay, we'll come back to that later. But I think they've spent 3 months just
fighting it out in the Holy Bar and Grail,
or alternating between like banging each other and then fighting.
True.
Which is probably what happened.
Probably the actual.
I have a note that said Starr with hair is just a Sutherland because he looks like. He looks like
comes back to Sutherland.
If you took all of the Sutherland men
and merged them,
I feel like it would be close to what Hair Starr looks like with that shitty wig.
That's pretty wonderful. I'll take that.
That is a really that's an extra shitty wig.
Oh, it's great though. I love it.
It's like a wig from. It reminds me of somebody from Willy Wonka. I just can't place it.
It's almost kind of like, well, I guess more towards the one when he was a kid is kind of like a He-Man wig.
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah.
And this one's got a little bit more like layering and feathering to it, I guess.
It's a little better, a little updated.
But no, it's weird. I think Pip Torrens is one of those people where he just looks so bald that anything is going to look completely wrong.
He would look strange with hair. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, I agree.
So
yeah, But this is the occasion where a shitty wig is good.
Oh, yeah. No.
You got to have a shitty wig.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. One of Bruce's questions is, do we think that Starr's looks have actually been or really been restored? I'm wondering if it's not an illusion of some sort.
I kind of think it is based on this portrayal of God. He's not going to just do that. He's pretty mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why. I'm still left wondering why. What's the point of any of it? But hopefully the shoe drops and I'm like, okay, all right. So
we'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
whatever. I'm looking forward to a wigged Starr for another episode or two.
And I did the final moment of the episode of Jesse and Tulip embracing, and then we cut to see Cassidy still at the door with like the door open, and he just laughs.
You like scoff. It's like a yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of, it's like, of course.
Yep.
Of course this happens to me
Now,
yeah.
Yep.
So
yeah, right when it all seemed like it was going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know what I feel. Do you feel as like unsure of where we're really headed?
Oh yeah.
As I like there's this looming specter of the apocalypse over everything and this plan that God has, but other than that, like, there's part of me that's like, is this going to be a Fight Club-ish type of ending where the apocalypse does occur, but they still have each other, or like?
Yeah, truthfully, I don't know.
Yeah,
I know. It is possible still to get to close to the ending of the book.
Yeah,
but not in a way that will make any sense to you. At this point, we're going so far down this direction that to try to come back and make the correct turn back to the books would.
Are you saying we can't take the blueberries off the hamburger?
I'm saying maybe you can add something to offset the blueberry or to tie it all together.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think that we will get. Bruce and I were kind of talking about this a little bit in the Discord. I think that it's possible to retain elements of the ending, certain beats, but as far as like, I don't know. I just don't know. Yeah.
Do you think you could be satisfied by whatever ending the show will posit? Is there still room for that to happen?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are like 3 to 5 things I'd like to see. And they're not all big. Some of them are big, but some of them are just small exchanges between characters and certain things that would make me satisfied. But
is one of those Eugene and the Saint of Killers reuniting?
6 things that I'd like to see. No. Actually, it seems like they're setting Eugene up for his ultimate fate sort of from the comics, which who fucking cares at this point? It just doesn't matter.
That insertion of Eugene in this episode is, I think, everything wrong with this season of Preacher.
Well, yeah, it seems like they had. I know now where they wanted to go with Eugene, and I think they're still going to go there. It's just not going to make any sense.
No,
it's gonna feel really, really dissatisfied. You're gonna be laughing. You're just gonna be like, okay, sure.
Between like. I don't know. I guess everything went wrong when we had a season 2 with Ian Coletti in the credits, and we like didn't see him forever.
Yeah,
you know.
I do think that one of the pivotal character moments has passed us by and has not occurred. So I do think that the ultimate fate of the 3 leads is now. I don't know where it's going to go because there were several things that happen in the book that didn't happen in the show that would have set up the ending.
Yeah.
And because that hasn't happened is the biggest thing where I'm like, I don't know. So I don't know. It's weird.
Well,
I kind of want to, we have 2 more episodes?
2 more episodes.
Yeah. I kind of want to go reread the whole thing in the next 2 weeks, which is totally doable. I started rereading it at the beginning of this season and I got like 15 to 20 issues in, so I should just pick it up. But, yeah, I do want to really refresh myself on the ending because I'm sure they will pepper in lots of little things that I'm just, it's that binge thing.
Yeah.
Every time I read the book, I binge it. So I retain the first like 15 to 20 issues really well, and the ending kind of starts to
autopilot it a little bit.
It gets a little murky, and by then I'm really enjoying it, but at the same time I'm trying to get done with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to probably pace myself.
Refresh some details.
Yeah, read a couple issues a day.
All right. Well,
Yeah, I didn't love this episode too much, but it felt more like a lot of table setting and wrapping up some little things, but overall just...
It has me really worried for 9. Like, I think this next episode can go one of two ways. It's either going to be like a full stop on action and any moving forward, or it's hard to know if they'll do the HBO model of episode 9 is where shit hits the fan, and then episode 10 is falling action and like resolution and like, you know, typically where they would set up for the next season a little bit too. But obviously that wouldn't happen here. So
I think 10 is going to be the big one. Yeah. I think 9, based on the fact that we're all back in Masada, or near Masada, and there's still 2 episodes to go. Like, I feel like a lot of stuff is going to happen and be addressed in episode 9, but I think all the threads will cinch together or fall apart in episode 10.
Okay.
2 more weeks.
We shall see.
Yep.
Feels weird to be...
Get your feedback in while you can before we shut the website down.
Yeah, full dark mode as soon as the season's over. Mark did reply to me, because I did reply to him before we started recording. He said, yeah, that's the guy we were thinking of. We froze the screen when it was in a half profile, and we thought it really looked like him. Maybe not, though, based on...
He does, but it's the glasses are a big component.
Yeah, absolutely. No, honestly, there's one part where he cringes his face, and there's light on his face. I'll try and post these. They're on our Twitter. If you look at my posts on our Twitter account, it's Mark replied off of last week's recap posting. But you can get a look at those two pictures, and he looks like a dead ringer for Rogan in one. But
I mean, it might be. I guess it's not. It really does, though. Yeah, it really does.
But it's like they would have swapped the actor out for one shot and then put him back. It's really strange.
That would be really funny if they cast the guy who he looks just like Seth. I got a funny idea. Let's put Seth in the wardrobe and have him be in one shot and then put the actor in the other.
I think when you watch it all in motion, it makes a little more sense, though. So, you know.
Yeah, in the first one, he looks a lot like him, and in the second one, he doesn't as much.
Yeah, that was very purposefully. I paused it at that point because I was like, this looks just like Seth Rogen.
It's that squint.
Yes, 100%.
That's great.
With the glasses.
Yeah, at G2T Podcast. Come see this riveting conversation that we're talking about.
Absolutely. So,
on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does this man look like Seth Rogen?
Yeah, let us know your thoughts. Tweet at us. All right. Once again, you can find more episodes of our podcast at g2tpodcast.com. We're also on TV Time, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. We're also G2T Podcast on Twitter, and you can email us at g2tpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our podcasts and share your thoughts on AMC's Preacher so we can read them on our show. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Preacher or our podcast. The Midwest Podcast Network has other shows about video games. The Midwest Game Nerds Podcast, where we talked about Control and Gears 5 this week. Horror movies, like Horror Movie Yearbook, where they did a Friday the 13th bracket that you should check out. FX's The Alienist and HBO's Westworld. We also put out a bonus episode of our Midwest Film Nerds Podcast. Nick and I had some conversations before and after some Gone to Texas recording sessions about Spider-Man and Marvel and Sony, as well as It Chapter 2. Go check those out and find out how to support the network as well at MidwestPodcastNetwork.com. Our theme music is the song All In by The Red Thread, and it is being used under a non-commercial Creative Commons license. And that's all for this episode of Gone to Texas. We can't wait to see what next week's episode of Preacher brings, but until then, go forth and speak the good word.